Can Australia lead the quantum computing revolution?
And does Google's Pixel justify its asking price?
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel. Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm joined by a man who's powered by the Serious Cybernetics Corporation's genuine people personalities, Alex Kidman.
Hi.
We're also joined by Cosmos Magazine editor-at-large, Wilson De Silva. Wilson, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys.
Alex, what's new in tech?
Apple is highly likely to finally announce new MacBooks next week at an event to be held in the US on October the 27th. While iPad and iPhone releases have come thick and fast recently, it's been a long time since a MacBook refresh. Current rumours suggest that there will be USB-C but no MagSafe charging, and that the function keys will be cut in favour of a touch OLED panel that changes depending on the application and use.
The blame game continues over the Australian census debacle, which reportedly cost taxpayers $30 million. The Bureau of Statistics has publicly criticised IBM for failing to halt the denial of service attack allegedly responsible for knocking the census offline. Now IBM is laying the blame squarely at the feet of its internet service provider partner NextGen and upstream supplier Vocus, while they're pointing the finger back at IBM.
Vodafone has announced that it's throwing its big red hat into the ISP ring, with NBN plans to be sold to businesses and consumers by the end of next year. No joy for you if you're not in an NBN area though, as it has no plans to offer fixed-line ADSL services.
Tesla electric cars are getting a serious upgrade, with every car coming out of the factory now packing the hardware required to support full self-driving capabilities. This includes 8 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors and a forward-facing radar to supposedly make your robot chauffeur substantially safer than a human driver. So, Alex, we may be seeing new MacBooks. Is it time to get excited about this? Do people still care about MacBooks?
Well, Apple's obviously trying to get people excited, putting out mysterious invitations. And by the way, Apple, mine's still missing. Just thought I'd put it out there. Yeah. Funny how these things happen. Must have been lost in the mail. But that being said, the wide suspicion is that their event next week, they're going to announce new MacBooks. It is always feasible, of course, because it is about 12 months since they last did this, that it could actually be an iPad-style release. It could also be, and some of the rumours suggest this, a bit more of a hybrid device. And this seems to be kind of where they're pushing. They've definitely been pushing that idea that an iPad, and especially an iPad Pro, is all the computer you might need. I would disagree, but it's hard not to look at them and say, well, it's been a long time since you refreshed the MacBook Pro. It's been an even longer time since you've refreshed, say, the Mac Mini or the Mac Pro. Apple doesn't seem that kind of invested in the MacBook line. And, I mean, looking at their sales figures, it's not hard to see why. People buy lots and lots of iPhones. People buy a reasonable number of iPads. They buy far, far fewer MacBooks. Wilson, are you a Mac man?
I certainly am. Less of a MacBook, more Mac Air. Quite fond of the little laptop. And a beautiful 5K, Retina 5K 27-inch desktop.
Nice.
I agree with you, Alex. You kind of need different computing solutions for different things. So, yeah.
Are you interested in
as well?
Are you interested in some hybrid Frankenstein sort of Microsoft Surface thing from Apple?
Gosh, you got to wait and see, really. I mean, the Frankenstein component offered by MS wasn't so brilliant at first, but you know, it started to shake out and looking a lot better.
Yeah,
I don't know. You've got to give it a shot. You got to try. It's like you know, in a menu, you got to suck it and see.
It's a lot of money to suck it and see, though. That's the thing. We're not talking about, you know, something like, we'll get rid of it. It's the kind of thing you invest in for a couple of years, and it is a big leap.
But isn't that the thing generally with technology, that you really have to... sometimes you think you're really sold on something from trialing it out of the store, and then you find that it just doesn't work for you. You don't use it. I find a lot of that with different apps or different applications. Sometimes with actual hardware, that sometimes it doesn't fit in with the way your mind works, and you tend not to use it. I don't know.
Yeah. As a Mac user, I'm a bit frustrated that it seems that they're sometimes trying to dumb down Macs to turn them into glorified iPads. So I'd be a bit worried if they went further down that path. There's a certain, demographic, and you'll pry their Mac out of their cold dead hands. So I'd like some reassurance actually from Apple that they can do all the iPad stuff they want. And we're due for a new iPad Air. I've been looking into it because I've got to get one for one of my kids next year for school. So I'm waiting to see if there's a new model coming out. We are due for one of them. They can do whatever they want, but don't mess with the MacBook. I'd like there to still be some kind of MacBook that's actually a PC and not a touchy-feely thing.
Touchy-feely does seem to be where they're going,
Get off my lawn, old man shouts at cloud, that kind of thing.
So, Adam, big news on what is technically, specifically speaking, a very, very small front, because quantum computing should deal with things that are incredibly microscopic. But still, big news on the quantum computing, and especially the quantum computing in Australia front. What is it?
Yeah, basically the federal government, Telstra and the Commonwealth Bank have just kicked in $70 million to fund quantum computing research at the University of New South Wales. This is partly on the back of a breakthrough that they've had where they're managing to use quantum, so individual atoms, to do calculations. They've found a way to keep them stable for longer so you can do more with them. And this is enough to say, right, let's go and see if we can build some quantum computing chips, and this could be the beginning of something big. Now, Wilson, you're a man of science. You know about this stuff. We should also say at this point that you do some media advisory work for the University of New South Wales. But, that aside, being a multi-award winning Australian science journalist, I think you're more than qualified to sort of talk us through this. What does this mean, and is it worth getting excited about?
Well, the announcement this week has been, in a sense, an incremental advance, but still pretty surprising because really 10 years ago, nobody thought that it was going to be possible to create quantum computers at all. In fact, when they were first proposed in 1994, everyone just thought, well, nice idea, but relatively impossible. And now we're really getting to the point where this is going to be possible. So what happened this week is one of the things about quantum computers is they have to maintain, instead of having these 0 and 1 component, which what makes digital. In the quantum world, things can be in multiple states at multiple times, which means that instead of doing calculations and trying to put cores of these binary processes next to each other to create cores that have to sequentially but at the same time process, there is ultimately a limit, because in classical computers, the computers that we use now, you have to process step by step. With quantum computers, you can do 8 steps at once, it would seem, because of this thing called superposition, where something can be in multiple places. As a result, some processing challenges, everything from searching massive databases to looking for a ship at sea by searching through all the digital images taken by satellites. Those sort of things that are massive, complex challenges. A quantum computer could theoretically do it. Now look, 10 years ago, everyone's saying, yes, this is great, and let's go down this path, but it's going to be really hard. And a decision was made at the University of New South Wales, and it's now starting to look like the right decision, to go down the silicon path. It was thought that silicon would be too difficult to make work in quantum computing, just because of the nature at the subatomic level. Silicon is quite fuzzy and noisy in the sense that there's a lot of atoms spinning around. So a lot of researchers who work in this field have gone for rather more exotic materials.
Yep.
The problem with those exotic materials is that some of them can only be found, like there's one, I forget which one, but you can only find it in one particular mine in Africa. So these guys went down silicon because guess what? That's what we've all been using for 50 years, and we understand it so well.
And
there's
so
an awful lot of sand about, basically.
Yes, but so this stuff is not, it's no longer just theoretical, it's not a question of if, it's basically a question of when at this point, isn't it? The science
it's looking like that. The crucial hurdle seems to have been last year, the last of the skeptics kind of disappeared on the silicon front, certainly, when, again, a team at UNSW, but involving nodes around the country, built a quantum logic gate in silicon for the first time. And that's, that's the very basic core of what a computer does. It having a logic gate that it means you can actually do processing. And these people at UNSW actually did that. Since then, there have been two major advances that they've made. The most end of last year, they proved that you can actually code. You can actually write a type of quantum-based computer coding, which people have been scratching their heads about. How are you going to actually program for this sort of stuff? Yeah. And then this week, what they've proven is that you can actually maintain the qubit or the quantum bit, how you measure information, quite stable for 10 times longer than they thought was possible. So yeah, the path is looking more and more like we're going to see this stuff, and we're going to see it probably closer than people expected.
So it sounds like they're focused on the real practical side of how to get this up and running, which I get, because it can remain theory on paper forever. Like you say, there was time when people said, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea, but so the focus has been, how are we going to make this work in the real world?
It has, yeah. And this is where these guys, being engineers, they're very focused on delivering outcomes. Yes. If you like,
the Oompa Loompas of the science world, as Sheldon likes to say.
if you like, scientists dig the well and find the water. It's the engineers who figure out how the hell to get it out and turn it into stuff that we can use. So, because both the majority of the groups who have led these advances in the last few years have been the engineers, they are really focused on making it real.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of the reason that they've attracted 70 million, and there's going to be I suspect it's going to reach 100 million when they actually create a company, because they're actually going to found a company. The focus is silicon, because the whole industry is classical computers are based on silicon. So we have, if you like, stretched and pushed and kicked silicon so much we understand it extremely well. So and there's also an established infrastructure, an established industry, manufacturing facilities. There's a lot of experience with silicon, and that can only accelerate whatever these guys, and no doubt other groups, will develop or invent.
Yeah. So is this a chance for Australia to get in on the ground floor for a change?
Yes, it is. It is. We're actually, in fact, we've been here before, would you believe?
Yeah.
In 1947, something called CIRAC, the CSIRO's predecessor, created something called CIRAC, the automatic computer from the CSIR.
Yeah.
We actually had the fourth computer in the world, in the sense of proper digital computer. And an inquiry was held in the 1950s about whether we should proceed down this path, and it was decided that we should stick to wool and wheat and those things that we know, rather than try this newfangled stuff.
And digging the ground up and selling it to other people. Stick to what you know.
They were pretty rough on all sorts of computing back in the 50s, though. It wasn't just Australia doing this, although obviously it was regrettable. And I guess, though, with this much money being kind of poured into it, and from private firms like Telstra or the Commonwealth Bank, presumably there's some end goal practical applications in mind as well.
There is. They've got to build a circuitry, basically. They've proven they can create one logic gate. So if you like, it's a proof of concept that you can do, and they've proven that you can code for it. So they've got a proof of concept. Now they need to scale it up. They need to actually, without building a $1 billion factory to build these things, which is what you need to build a whole processor, they need to build stacks of these things to show that processing can actually go on, and it can handle large pieces of computation. And that's sort of aiming for something like a 10 or 20 qubit chip. So that's their goal in the next 10 years. It has to be said, some other groups using the exotic materials have done larger amounts of processing. I'm just being, accurate. Have done larger amounts of processing, but again, they're using exotic materials for which, with the exception of gallium arsenide, are not actually used in computing now. Now, in the case of gallium arsenide, there is an expense involved, and that's why, because they're so expensive, they tend to be used in where tolerance is required, and basically, the ability to withstand very challenging environments, which is why they're used in space.
All right, so Alex, the Google's Pixel smartphone is finally here. You've had your hands on it. What do you think?
Look, the Pixel and the Pixel XL, and one nice kind of interesting point of difference here is that while the XL is larger than the Pixel, that's about it. It's got a bigger screen, it's got a bigger battery. Otherwise, they are identical, which is kind of nice, looking at it from an iPhone perspective, where the larger variant of the iPhone always seems to have a nicer camera or other better features. But I've been testing them out over the last week, and it's a really kind of interesting, sometimes great, sometimes frustrating experience. It's not quite the superphone I think that people think it is. It has aspects that work really, really well, and it has other stuff that should be in a premium phone that just seem to be missing.
So, because this is a top dollar phone, we're talking more than $1,000. What's missing that you think should be there in a phone of that expense?
Okay, the two big headline things are the design. So this year we've seen some really, really nice looking, nice designed phones. You look at things like the S7 Edge, the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, even if you exclude that whole catching fire thing, the Note 7 was a nice looking phone, and Sony's new Xperia XZ is really beautiful. The Pixel, honestly, looks like it kind of fell off the back of a Chinese factory. It's really plain, and that's kind of extraordinary in this space where having a premium phone is a bit of a status icon, and it's something you kind of want to stand out. These really don't, and I don't quite get why, especially when you consider that while Google's done all the in-house design work, it's actually been built by HTC. HTC made the HTC 10, which, whilst it had its own flaws, was a pretty nice looking phone as well. You would have thought someone would have tapped them on the shoulder and said, "Hey guys, this is a bit bland." But aside from that, it's also not water resistant. And that's becoming a key feature for a lot of premium phones. And, with good reason. If you're spending more than $1,000 on a phone, it'd be nice to think that if it does get accidentally splashed, it's not going to do you in. This one doesn't have that. And again, I don't quite get why. No. It shares a similar feature with that iPhones have had pretty much forever, which is there's no expandable memory. But Android is built on the idea of, yes, slap a micro SD card in there, but not for the Pixel, because there's this philosophical point with Google where Google lives in the cloud, and it figures you should as well. So
that'll be an instant deal breaker for some people. That will be an instant deal breaker. No expandable storage.
Absolutely, no, it's a problem. To Google, to their credit, Google will give you unlimited photo storage, for example, if you buy a Pixel. Specifically, if you buy a Pixel, not so much for other Android devices. That's a plus for some people, as long as, of course, you can afford the mobile data to upload all your photos.
That's what I was going to say. Are they going to pay my phone bill as well? If they're not chipping in for my phone bill, yeah. So, Wilson, are you an Android man, an iPhone man, heaven forbid a Windows Phone man?
I'm an iPhone man, but I've got to say, I agree, Alex. The form factor, as the people in the mobile industry talk about it, how a phone feels and looks, is actually part of the experience, and particularly something you carry around with you all day. So if it ain't that flash, that does have an impact on how you perceive it. But I imagine, Alex, it does have a headphone jack.
It has a headphone jack, yes. They have not omitted the headphone jack. Headphone jack and USB-C for charging and data are present. And USB-C is becoming more and more common, but you're still probably going to find if you get one of these things that your friends or your workplace probably only has a micro USB or a lightning adapter, so you're probably going to need to carry a few cables or an adapter around with you. It's also, it's a pleasantly fast phone. It's actually running off the Snapdragon 821 processor, which is, it's a bit like turning the 820 up to 11. It's that little bit slicker, and it's got its own launcher, and of course it's running Android 7.0 Nougat, which works very, very nicely. But it's also got that very Google philosophy to it, where it wants to know all your information. And this is built into, I don't know, this was discussed a couple of weeks ago when I wasn't on the show, the Google Assistant, which is its inbuilt AI assistant that knows pretty much everything you tell it, and by default, if you let it, will stay on 24/7 listening to pretty much everything you do, in theory to enable you to very quickly kind of go, okay, Google, and I've probably just screwed up a few people's phones listening to this, but okay, Google, show me the weather, or whatever. But it's listening, it's processing, and there's a bit of the tinfoil hat in me that doesn't like that so much. I don't
think I'd keep it on the bedside table if it wants to listen in all the time.
I don't want to think about what goes on your bedside table, Adam.
I imagine that it is actually quite funny if people do leave their phones on. You can imagine that a radio broadcast where somebody says, "Okay, Google," is going to trigger a whole bunch of phones to do things, which sounds fantastic. It sounds like the premise for a comedy skit. But listen,
that happened to the
sorry to
interrupt for a second. That happened with an Xbox One demo a couple of years ago. You can speak to the Xbox and say, Xbox on and Xbox off and whatever. And so the guy doing the demo on this video stream said Xbox off, and all these people's Xboxes turned off.
Yes, just to be fair and equitable, I should say, "Hey Siri, hey Cortana," just to just to get everyone.
Sorry, I interrupted you, mate.
I was just going to say that the not being able to get memory cards was one of the key defining points between, if you like, the iPhone world and the non-iPhone world. So to restrict that, and it's very annoying for me because you living on the cloud is fine, but you would like occasionally to be able to extract, whether it's photos or whatever else, out of your phone, and not having that option with the iPhone does annoy me. And one of the attractions of the non-iPhone world was that you could do that. So not having that ability, again, sounds like a backward step.
Yeah, I guess the flip side of that is this is the first Category 11 phone in Australia. So, in theory, if you want to get your stuff out of the cloud, you can do so much, much faster. And certainly my own tests, if you get on the right Telstra, because Telstra are the only ones offering Category 11 across their network so far, which is presumably why they're the exclusive partner for the Pixel in Australia. But if you get on the right Telstra cell, it can be astonishingly quick. Of course, astonishingly quick is also astonishingly expensive, because the faster you can burn through data, the faster you're handing over the contents of your wallet. So
how fast
there's a balance game there too.
A few hundred megaseconds?
I've peaked over 200 on a cell in real world terms. It should be able to. The number escapes the top of my head at the moment, but it should be able to peak faster than that as well. Yeah. But it is this interesting device, and I think it's also this interesting device that very much shows the way Google thinks about what a premium smartphone should be, because the challenge that all the premium phones have is that the mid-range phones now are really rather good. They've got pretty decent cameras, probably good enough cameras. They've got pretty decent processors, again, good enough for the vast majority of people who do, many of the same repetitive tasks on their smartphones. So standing out in that premium space it's a tricky job, and Google's perception on it seems to be, right, here's this thing, and you can kind of make of it whatever you want as long as you give us your information. Apple's take is almost the reverse. We don't really want your information, but we want to guide you down this very specific path of this is how you do all these core smartphone things or else.
Good place to stop. I think we're probably about for time. That's about right.
We're probably well and truly due. Sure.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, let's do the wrap and call it a podcast. Well, that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. Remember, if you've got any comments, hit us up in the comments section on YouTube, via Twitter, or the Facebook Vertical Hold page. Wilson, thanks for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, gentlemen.
Thanks everyone for listening, and remember, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel.